pod bay doors, please, Hal.
My God. Now she's dead.
No, she's not.
She's alive?
She's Nosferatu.
She's Italian?
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again. I'm your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com and also ArmchairOscars.com. Seated here with my creature of the night, the critic, dare I say legend, from TalkMovieMe.com. You know him, you love him, the one and only Mr. Doug Heller. How the heck are you today, sir?
Do not hurry, my young friend. No one can escape his destiny.
You know how many times I've heard that?
My other option was the master is dead. But, you know.
Welcome to our welcome to yet another vampire story.
I have an affinity for vampire stories, so these will tend to show up a lot over the years in this.
They are a dime a dozen.
They are, but the good ones are great.
We're talking today about F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu from 1922.
Love this movie.
And let me tell you, this congratulations on this being the oldest movie we've ever talked about. This movie is 97 years old. Do the calculations yourself. It is 97 years old.
Yep, we are.
And
it's.
I'm baffled to live in a time when a movie can be 100 years old.
Yeah. I mean, even though, like, really, we've been in that reality for
several years.
20 years, really.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't 1887, 1889 when the first ones were really put down.
Right.
So, yeah, we've been living in that reality for a long time. It's just now we're noticing films that we actually have seen.
I saw a quote on Facebook yesterday that said, "In my brain, 1990 was still 10 years ago."
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, it's one of my favorite movies is Greed. Von Stroheim. I love that movie.
Me too.
And I just realized it turned 100 this year.
Yeah, and I wish I would have thought of that, because I would have loved to have talked about it on its centennial. That may end up being a special episode, midweek non-mini, because
Greed is an incredible film.
Greed is remarkable. I think I've seen it twice. Which is
saw it in the theater.
No small feat for a 4-hour film.
No. It does require your patience.
Oh, yeah. But it's so good.
And, the best film by D.W. Griffith is Intolerance, in my opinion.
Yes.
And it's 103 years old.
103, yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
But we're talking about Nosferatu, and we're crazy about German cinema.
Apparently, yeah.
we are insane about German expressionism.
I do.
And
I mean,
you talked about it a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Talked about M.
Mm-hmm. Which will be its own episode.
Mm-hmm.
So will, I believe, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari at some point. Possibly even next year by one of us.
Maybe.
If we don't think of something else by then. This is just one of the great. Nosferatu is. I can't get tired of this movie. I think I've seen this silent more than anything else, other than maybe Modern Times.
I saw this in a theater in 2002, and with a live orchestra on Halloween night.
Wow.
It's an incredible experience.
I bet.
And one of the things that you have to get past, the idea of Dracula the blood sucking, turning into a bat,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff, all the bric-a-brac that we get from Dracula films. When you watch this film, you have to realize that every bit of that stuff this movie predates all of that.
Yeah.
Everything you know about Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the stuff that was perfected by Bela Lugosi
Mm-hmm.
really starts here.
Yeah.
Because the story that you know is here. Although Bram Stoker's widow had a problem with this.
Well, because she didn't give them the rights to do it. That's
Right.
so they changed the
So,
names, but the plot's still basically the same. And even one
yeah,
copy says freely adapted from
yeah.
Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's like, well, yeah. She actually did you know that she had ordered all of the prints and negatives to be destroyed?
I
And
did.
like
Yeah.
one somehow
Hmm.
managed to get through, and that's how it still exists today.
Right. But,
The copy I saw actually has that freely adapted title card at the beginning.
oh, I was in I was in a store one time and I saw, it was one of those, I think it was a store that sold video games.
Mm-hmm.
And, it had a specialized, just a little thing for dollar videos.
Yeah.
And one of them was Nosferatu from Good Times Video.
Oh, well, there you go.
And I was like, you know what? I've been screwed by Good Times
So much.
far too many times because Good Times is a cheap conveyor belt.
Yeah.
Was a cheap conveyor belt
I mean,
video
their
distribution.
their cases were just cardboard boxes. They weren't
Hmm.
even plastic standard DVD covers. Like,
And if you got a silent movie, that's exactly what you
oh
got.
yeah, no scores at all. Although
No.
I would personally recommend no score at all, a la
Hmm.
like Passion of Joan of Arc,
Hmm.
over the one score that was composed on the copy that I own,
Yeah.
which was done by the Silent Orchestra, and they should have remained so, because it was like vibes in a Casio. Like
Yeah.
I've heard better music on things that they've riffed on riff tracks in Mystery Science Theater 3000. Like there have been better scores on some of those.
Lots of theremin music.
Not on that one, I think. No, maybe there was. But like every once in a while they would almost get into the mood of what we were seeing,
Yeah.
and then it would just get really jaunty and upbeat. I'm like, I'm not watching anything that's jaunty and upbeat. I shouldn't be hearing things that are jaunty and upbeat.
Or
Come
like
on.
you, or like you get his shadow and he's creeping up the stairs, and what you hear is do 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 do. It's like a comedy.
Yeah, I mean, there
It's
is.
so bad,
It is. But the other music track that's on the DVD that I have, that I got a long time ago, is just a straight up organ, that actually creates mood and
Yeah.
suspense and knows when to retreat and knows when to be a little bit more powerful. So at least I could switch over to that and not have vibe and Casio music all the way through, ruining my experience.
Right.
And I think that happens every time I put this DVD in, because that's the default. The modern score is the default on my disc. Every time.
You really have to look to find a good one because for every good one there are 10 bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you have to, yeah, you really have to.
Hey,
Uh,
mine even has a commentary track.
really,
Yeah. I didn't listen to it, but it has it.
I can't stand commentary tracks by scholars because you get this a lot on
Oh
Criterion.
yeah.
These scholars and these experts because they're so bland.
Well, the worst ones are when it's just them by themselves and they're reading word for word just this whole thing that they wrote out for the commentary. You know,
Right.
there's no inflection in their voice. There's no nothing going on. But when it's scholars in the same room with another scholar,
Mhm.
those can be fun because they're playing off each other.
Or like on Safety Last, it was a scholar and it was Leonard Maltin,
Mm-hmm.
and because Leonard Maltin's always fun
Mm-hmm.
on his commentaries because he's not reading. But
Right.
let's talk about this film because this is a very unusual version if you're used to the if you're used to the Dracula films.
Right. And
And I'm talking about everybody from
specifically the
Bela
grounding of it.
Lugosi,
Yeah.
Christopher Lee, Frank Langella,
Mm-hmm.
Gary Oldman.
Gary
They
Oldman
all
did
are.
pull a lot from Max Schreck.
I think they all did.
Yeah.
The only difference is most of them are pulling from Bela Lugosi,
Yeah.
but the basic framework they're pulling from Max Schreck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the great thing about this film, as I said, is that all of the things that you associate and you laugh at when it comes to Dracula come from here in the basic framework, in the guy wanting to do the real estate deal on the
Mm-hmm.
Carfax Abbey and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He goes to the castle, he spooks the local townsfolk,
Mm-hmm.
and then he gets in the cart, and the cart is, the coach driver is behaving, but all of that comes from here,
Mm-hmm.
and may very possibly have come from the book. But
Yeah, it does. Have you read the book?
no,
I
I've
did
not.
a long time ago. I made my way through it mostly on audiobook
Mhm.
because I was doing a lot of driving. So uh, a lot of it
Yeah, I think I may
is
have gotten through it on
yeah.
audiobook. I
A
I
lot
don't
of it
remember.
the story that we know that is basically what we've seen all the way up from this through whatever last iteration, largely pretty faithful to the book. It's a long book. There's a lot of
No
detail.
kidding.
There's a lot of detail that gets lost in the translation into film.
Mhm.
Um, but the story's basically
They pick out
basically
the
the same.
they pick out the bigger parts.
Right. They really play up the love or the obsession angle between the girl and the vampire, whomever
Mhm.
it ends up being, Orlok, Dracula,
Yeah,
whomever, or Mina and whatever her name is in this one, Greta probably. I don't
yeah.
know.
Harker and it's Hutter.
Yeah, Harker and Hutter. Yeah. So yeah, they play that up because that plays better for a movie audience.
Mhm.
Um, so there's a lot less of that in the book. He's really just moving to where he can kill without people really noticing because in a metropolitan area people get killed all the time.
Mhm.
Perfect place for a
Yeah.
vampire. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and somebody's son goes missing and there's only 30 people in the town and now suddenly there's 29 and everybody knows that they didn't do it, who are they going to go see? You. Like,
Well, given the times, probably the Jewish guy,
well,
or the Gypsies, or
yeah, because
you know,
that changed pretty quickly after this was said.
yeah.
Uh, this is
Believe
this
me,
is set in what 1838 or something.
believe me. Paranoid townsfolk out in the middle of nowhere will find somebody to blame for something,
Oh yeah, yeah. As long as it's not themselves.
as long as it's not themselves. Um, but let's talk a little bit about something that's hard to talk about, and that's Max Schreck.
Have you ever seen any pictures of him not as Count Orlok?
Yes, and it's always the same picture.
Okay, I don't know if I ever have.
It's always the same picture. And believe me, it's not far off.
Really?
Yeah. Um, he's not smiling. And really, all you got to do is take off the ears and take off the eye makeup, and that's it. It's pretty much it. Uh,
Ooh. Yeah?
he he's not playing the character that Bela Lugosi played.
Not even
This
almost.
is as if the transformation from a bat um, got stuck halfway through. That's
Mm-hmm.
sort of in the late stages of transformation, got
Right.
stuck somewhere.
Right.
Um, he does not look human. And what is owed to this performance, what's given to this performance brilliantly, is the fact that we don't know that much about Max Schreck,
No.
or the average person doesn't.
Right.
And so you can believe he's a genuine article.
It's not long after the movie was released, people assumed that he really was a
Mhm.
vampire. That started going around really quickly after the movie came out.
And he died young,
Yes. 56, I
he-
think I just
only
saw.
56.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if unless you're a fan of German cinema, you probably have never seen anything else he's ever been in.
Right.
And so, I guess maybe this is what all actors want. You want to be remembered and immortalized for something. You want your name to last forever. You know, a century after you're gone,
Right.
people will still remember you
Yeah.
for something.
Yeah.
Um, so anytime anybody hears about Max Schreck, that's the first thing they think of.
That's the only thing they
And
think
for
of.
and for most people, that's the only thing they think of.
Mm-hmm.
And but the character that he plays is not suave. He's not
No, no,
classy. He's
not
not.
even. Not he is nothing that you would equate with anything that you have kind of assumed that vampires are.
I have every reason to think that it's like you're watching the film and you're thinking, if you're standing in the room with him, you're going to assume that he smells like a corpse.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
There's a squalid quality to this character.
yeah.
He's got bat ears. He's wearing heavy guy liner,
Yeah.
and he's got these two fangs that are right in the front,
Right.
and it instills in you pure terror
Mm-hmm.
because every time he comes in the room, something terrible happens.
Right.
There's barely anything in this movie that happens that's good.
Right.
And I love, and I want to say this, um, some of the things that he does in this performance are remarkable. There's one thing that he does is when he goes to move his head,
Mm-hmm.
the eyes go first,
Yes.
and then the head.
Uh-huh.
The eyes turn, and then the head
Which
follows.
is
It's just,
so creepy.
it's just so creepy.
It's just, you have to give Max Schreck so much credit for vanishing into this character and making him, I mean, making something like Shadow of the Vampire possible.
Hmm. Yeah.
Which is, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but, fictionalized, assuming that he indeed was a vampire and died
Hmm.
at the end of making this movie. Like, his death on screen was Max Schreck's real death.
Yeah.
That's not the case. He didn't die until like 1936 or 8, so like he was
Hmm.
fine. But
He lived another 10 years.
like, he was all right at
15.
that point. Yeah. So, uh, It's a level of commitment that you. I mean, people chase that today.
Mhm.
People have been chasing that forever.
Mhm.
Um, it's a performance, and we don't usually talk about performances all that much. It is a performance of real truth.
Mhm.
Like he finds the heart of this character, well, the lack of the heart of this character, and really does a deep dive into it.
And he pulls out all the humanity
Mm-hmm.
because the face is bat like
He doesn't
the
want
face
this
is
to be a sympathetic character.
the ears are too long, the ears are too big, the head is too big, the face is too long. When
Mm-hmm.
he stands in a doorway, the body is too long.
And he's always kind of hunched over, like he's got scoliosis after being alive for
So when he
however many
walks,
years. Yeah.
when he walks, and he's got these fingernails, it's gross fingernails, and when he walks, it's like he's floating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the things that he does in this movie, carrying the boxes of earth
Under one arm.
from the graveyards that carried the plague
Yeah.
onto that ship,
Yeah.
and all of those guys die.
Yeah.
So he is the rider on the pale horse.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He is death.
He is death, and death rides with him.
Hell
And so
follows with
there's
him, isn't it?
yes, hell
That's
follows
what
with
it
him,
is. Yeah.
and he is always. I mean, they unearth that everything around him is just death.
Right.
The plague, the rats, all of that stuff. He's like I say, he's not Bela Lugosi. He's not suave. You definitely wouldn't go to the opera with him.
No, you wouldn't want to see this guy. Uh, nope, that's it. You wouldn't really want to see this guy.
No,
Not like
no,
dark alley. Not like well lit. Doesn't matter. You
mhm,
don't want to see this guy.
no. Um, but he elicits, in a sort of way, a ferocious need to do the things that he has to do to survive.
Right. He looks feral.
Yeah.
He looks like he is a barely sentient animal.
Hmm.
Um,
Acting on instinct.
right, right, largely. And when you think about it, he's been alone for so long.
Hmm.
That's all he really has become. He retreated
Hmm.
from society because if you're immortal and you're in society and you're always going out and you never age, but your buddies do, they'll start to figure some crap out.
Yeah.
And so nobody will want to be around you. So he holds up in there. People don't know if he's alive. People don't know if he's dead, if they're having kids, if they're, flowers in the attic situation going
Hmm.
on or anything like that. Nobody knows.
Well, I'll tell you something else that this movie predicts is a trope that would happen in every slasher film later on, and that's the innocent dope who absolutely ignores
Yeah.
the warnings.
Yeah.
Every movie that you've ever seen with a kids going to summer camp or kids going to an old house and they pass by the gas station,
Any idiot that goes in to investigate
right?
is Hutter.
Yeah, I love the innocent dope who just misses all of the warning signs.
Or sees
Uh,
all of the warning signs and says, "That's ridiculous." And
there is literally a scene where he reads a book about it and he laughs and throws it on the floor.
throws it away. Yet somehow it still stays packed in his bag, and his wife finds it.
Isn't it interesting? I was watching this last night. The interstitial titles are telling you the story in a series of letters.
Mm-hmm.
That was really interesting. I've never seen a silent film that did that.
Yeah, it's Murnau patterned his Dracula after the way that Shelley wrote Frankenstein.
Right.
Which
Frankenstein.
yeah,
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. I could probably watch the movie without subtitles or without the interstitial titles.
Murnau was amazing at his pure visual storytelling and not really needing him. He and Hitchcock were
Yeah.
really good at not needing intertitles.
Well, if because it's all
Mind.
pantomime,
Yeah.
and you don't really need it if the story is good and the performances are good.
Hmm.
Um, because whenever you get a movie like this is all visual.
Hmm.
It's a completely visual story, so you wouldn't need
It
it.
doesn't. It doesn't really have any choice but to be because it is a silent film.
Yeah,
Unlike Star Wars, which is largely a silent film with a whole lot of noise.
right. Um, Murnau, the year before this, made a movie called The Last Laugh,
Oh, Emil Jannings. That's where they got the
which was
Joker
a
from.
yeah. Uh, it's about a proud doorman
Mhm.
at a hotel, and he's thrown out of his job because they figure he's too old to do it.
Right.
And the movie is about the downward spiral of what happens to him after that.
Hmm.
The movie, save for one, does not have any title cards.
Right.
It's all done in pantomime.
Hmm.
It's all done, but it's through the acting.
And it's one of the most amazing things you could ever hope to see.
And I could have easily watched Nosferatu the same way
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
because I didn't need. Because to be honest with you, if you watch the intertitles, they're all kind of lame.
Well, yeah, they're all just. I mean, none of it really
The words on the screen
matters.
are
You can figure all of it out without any
yeah.
of them.
If the director's clever enough.
Hmm. And in Nosferatu, if those got dropped in a print, it wouldn't change the film any.
Oh, what's really bad about interstitial titles is when they would have people from the country and the title cards would try to mimic their accent.
Oh, yeah,
Paul, I has come home to see you.
yeah, yeah. That
It's just,
I appreciate they're trying to add some flavor to it, but at the same time,
what's worse is when they do it to black people.
I was just gonna say
God.
the casual, unmitigated racism that comes out in whenever they tried to do that with a black person or an Asian person or a
Hmm.
Mexican or any a Spanish speaking or any non-English dialect, and even English dialect Southern people, like it was all just really bad, but they got super racist with the Asians and the black people.
And they try to write it phonetically,
Yeah. And they
and
would
it's
put the
just
hyphens so that it was like follow the bouncing ball before there could have been a bouncing ball.
right.
So
Yeah,
it's all pretty bad.
yeah. Um, but there's some touches in this film, visual touches. The two scenes where they're done in speed up
Hmm.
are really kind of funny.
Oh, when he's on the
Well,
boat,
first when he's driving
right?
the cart up to the it's done on purpose.
Yeah,
The film speeds up as he's going up the winding road. The other is when he's packing the coffins
right.
and he gets in it.
Uh huh. And then
He stacks the
not only is it done in fast motion, but it's done in stop motion.
Mhm.
So there are moments where everything's going really quickly, and then he stands up, and then he's in the case, and then he's on his back, and then
Mhm.
the
He
the
pulls the
the
lid
lid
on.
comes up, and then the lid goes down. It's like the same thing with the on the boat when the cover comes off and then
Hmm.
the trapdoor opens slowly and then opens up and then he rises out of the holds of the ship. Yeah.
Oh, that scene where he comes from flat on his back straight. That is brilliant.
Hmm.
That is so brilliant.
And really gone after pretty hard in Dracula Dead and loving it.
And I'm going to tell you, all of this stuff Coppola borrowed for his Dracula.
Oh, very much so.
Um, very much borrowing from all of these things that are in this film. Um,
I would say that Oldman is doing more Max Schreck than he is
yeah, Bela
um,
Lugosi.
Bela Lugosi. He had. There's a lot to talk about with that movie without it being all that great.
Hmm.
Um,
It's overstuffed.
yeah, yeah, it is. Uh, I enjoy Bram Stoker's Dracula and
Hmm.
Coppola's, but um, if I had to pick a best version, it's this. It's Nosferatu. Hands
Oh,
down.
this is the best vampire movie ever
Ever.
made.
A
All
strong
the
second
conventions.
being last week's.
Yeah, yeah. Because last week we talked about Let the Right
Let
One
the right
In,
one in, yeah.
and that's another film about the sadness and the misery
Hmm.
of having to live your life
Of
not
immortality,
only as an
yeah.
immortal, but your destiny, your survival and your sustenance are dependent upon murder and misery and
Hmm.
death. And so the Dracula story, when told right, is a very sad story.
Uh, that's actually something that um, Willem Dafoe's Max Schreck says in Shadow of the Vampire.
Mhm.
They said, what, being a real vampire, what do you think about Dracula? And he's like, yeah, Murnau gave that book to me. I thought it was sad because he hadn't had servants in 400 years. But then he goes into more like detailing. He's like, so when this guy shows up, he hasn't had real people around him for
Mhm.
400 years.
Yeah.
Is he even still going to know how to buy bread and pear wine and cheese? And,
Hmm.
like, how did any of this end up being any good? Because he would not remember the taste of food.
Right. He
It's.
wouldn't he wouldn't remember how to speak to people. He wouldn't
Right.
remember, all of that. Um, again, this is a predator.
Hmm.
This is not Ellie
No.
from Let the Right One In. This is not God. It's not the guy from Twilight.
No.
Um,
And it's
but
not for my my preacher fans. It's not
mhm,
Cassidy. If you haven't seen any of Preacher,
I haven't.
it's now ended. There were 4 seasons, and it's magnificent. It's super weird ass crazy show, but
Mhm.
the Preacher's best friends is a vampire that goes along with him.
You want to see a good movie? If you want to see a good show about that involves vampires, Being Human was a really good show.
The
The
British one,
British version.
the British one,
Yeah,
not the
the British one.
American one.
God no.
There were some really good vampire episodes of Supernatural too.
I never saw
Over the
Supernatural.
years, that was.
That show's been on for like 12 seasons, something.
It is currently airing its 14th and final.
God.
Yeah. And I've seen 9 of the 14 seasons.
Now I've heard this about sitcoms. I think it was Jerry Seinfeld said one time, a sitcom is usually good for about 5 seasons.
Hmm.
And then after that you're coasting.
Hmm.
On a drama, you have to be really, really good to keep it going.
Well, this will be the last we kind of talk about Supernatural. It was originally supposed to be 5 seasons.
Yeah.
It was supposed to end with them averting Armageddon.
Yeah.
but the creator Eric Kripke and the head of the CW, the head of the CW loves the show, and he
Mhm.
said, "I will renew it as long as they want to do it."
Yeah.
So they finally, it was supposed to be done after 10, and then they were like,
Mhm.
"Nope, season 11 is going to be the last one. No, season 12 is going to be the last. No, season 13 is going to be the last one," which would have been really funny if Supernatural had ended at 13 seasons.
Yeah.
That would have been kind of poetic, I think. But now they're actually billing it as the final season, so they're finally.
Well, also the when you get
Was it
to
Grey's
the point
Anatomy has
where
been on for 72 years or something like that?
CSI,
Oh yeah. Well, which
so when you
one?
get to the also also when you get to the point where the cast is moving on,
Uh-huh.
as they did with CSI Vegas, and the cast is moving on, and people are leaving the show, and there's a time to wrap it up.
Right. Instead of just saying, "Oh, well, life goes on with these different people." Well, you know what? Most of the time, I don't want to see those people because I
Right.
didn't spend all these years getting to know them. I spent all this time getting to know these other characters who aren't here anymore. So just
Yeah.
tell me that everything stays as normal and there's still getting weird whatevers, and don't show it to me. End
Or
it.
like sometimes the writers move on,
Mm-hmm.
and all the good writers have moved on, and you can tell. Um, when The Simpsons lost all of their original writers,
Mm-hmm.
you could tell.
It took a long time for them to recover.
Yeah. And now they're in, God, what are they? This show is this December.
33 years, I think.
This December will be the 30th
Yeah.
anniversary of the first airing of the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Let me
And
say that again.
unlike
30 years.
and unlike Mystery Science Theater 3000, who celebrated their 30th year in 2018, uh, th- this has been on for all of those 30 some odd
Mhm.
years, whereas Mystery Science Theater 3000 was on for 10 and then off for 20 before it came back.
7 seasons on Comedy Central and the rest on Sci-Fi.
3 on Sci-Fi, 2 on Netflix.
Yeah. And
And 1 movie.
but that show has been able to evolve.
Yes.
It's been able to change its
Mm-hmm.
tapestry a little bit. And by the way, this is a show about anything. If you came here for Nosferatu, this is the tapestry. This is what happens
We're
with our
coming
show.
back around to it, actually,
Well,
right around.
you know, we go off on these tangents. We talk about other things, and then we'll be back. But no, when as I was saying, when you uh, I forgot what I was saying
when
actually.
you see a lot of the stuff that you see in every other vampire movie, uh, it's hard to appreciate movies that were the first
Yeah,
if
when it's been so
if
copied.
there's already been a millionth.
Hmm.
You know, uh, that's why we talk when we talked about Citizen Kane. That's why
Hmm.
so many people coming to it now don't feel that it's as revolutionary as it is because they've been seeing movies like it for decades. It became part of the vocabulary. So everything that made it innovative and new has become tired and old as a result of copying.
Or it does it so well
Mm-hmm.
that it clamps the lid on that genre.
Right? Yeah. Touch of Evil. Um,
The
yeah.
Exorcist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's never been a devil possession movie after that that's ever been as good.
That's true. That is true.
Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
There's never been a Western comedy after that that has worked,
No.
that I can
Young
think of.
Frankenstein. There hasn't been a particularly good
Yeah,
horror comedy, uh, classical horror comedy, not like
there have been good
modern,
horror comedies, but not like
not
that.
like that.
But it sets a standard that is so cemented, and everybody starts to copy it. Halloween, for example,
Yeah.
the slasher movie.
Yeah.
It was done so well, and then everybody copied the slasher part, but they forgot what made Halloween work.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were a dime a dozen, and they went over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Jaws. There's never been a better shark movie.
Nope.
You know, there's never been a shark movie
Arguably,
that's
there
even
wasn't one almost as good even before it. So
true, true. But it took the
that
idea.
one kind of stood out from a pack that didn't exist yet, and then stayed there.
Well, the imitators.
Mm.
They take the bigger part, but they forget what made the movie work in the first place. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's like
characters.
yeah,
Characters that
and
you actually care about, so that you are worried if they're in danger, and not. It
you
looked
give a
like
damn.
it looked like it was about that guy's time to go. So okay, let's see how they kill him.
Well, that character's annoying, so
Right, exactly.
or
Guy
like
in
we
the
talked,
wheelchair.
or we talked
Texas
about,
Chainsaw Massacre.
or we talked about when the kids show up in Friday the 13th.
Mhm.
The characters are there to be killed.
Yeah.
They're there to act like idiots.
Mhm.
Um,
Be
smoke
jerks
pot,
and
smoke pot, get laid, and die.
yeah.
That's what they're there for.
There's worse ways to go.
Yeah, that's true. It's very
I
true.
mean, it's, if your last two acts are that before getting murdered, I think you went out pretty well. I don't.
But I think after all of that, I think I would jump and run because I really didn't want to follow those two things with an axe to the face.
Right. When you find the first body,
Hmm.
leave.
Go,
Leave.
just piss off.
Be not there anymore, and then it'll be fine.
And it's like I remember Eddie Murphy talking about. He said, "Why is it in the movies white people always stay in the house when the house is haunted?"
Right?
He said, in Poltergeist, not only did the white people stay in the house, they invited more white people over.
Yeah. He's not wrong. He's not.
I mean, he's not wrong.
I mean, like any of them can easily, like, if they get out of the house, right? Or
Mhm.
they get, in their case, the poltergeist was following them, but or wasn't it? No,
Not in the first
it did
one.
later.
No.
It did later. Um,
It did in the crappy sequels.
but with Nosferatu, there's no getting away from this guy.
No.
I mean, he brings plague rats with him.
Well, and he can hypnotize a woman who's in another country.
Yeah. Like, there's no getting away from this. The only way they can do it is the way that they do it, which is trick him into forgetting about the time and being in the light when the sun comes up.
Yeah.
That was I mean, enough of this. Let's look for his caskets of earth and destroy them, and then put the stake through his heart and cut his head off. No.
Mm-mm.
Kill this girl so that we can kill him.
Right.
It's like it is a brutal mindset.
Hmm.
Really, it is.
I would imagine that this was an exhausting experience for people in 1922.
Oh yeah.
Because every time you see him, something horrible is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Something terrible is going to
Yeah.
just.
And this was a first of its kind for horror movies. This was
Well, horror movies weren't new.
not new, but like as terrifying as this can be.
Yeah.
Even still today, just
Yeah.
by looking at Count Orlok.
Well, they did try other horror films. There was a Frankenstein movie made in 1910.
Yeah.
but it was more alchemy than it was science. And I mean, they were all visual experiments more than anything. And
Just like what was it, the 1909 or 1910 Ben-Hur?
yeah,
It's like 13 minutes long.
hmm
It's
yeah,
the single shortest version of that story ever told, and
hmm
it still takes forever.
I love some of these early films. I love one of my favorites is 1902, The Great Train Robbery.
Oh, well, yeah.
It's 15 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a train robbery, and most of the time is spent with the passengers getting off the train.
Right, yeah.
One
After
by one
another,
by
after
one
yeah.
by one. And three or four of the characters, the conductor, the robber, the ticket taker, are all played and part of the posse are all played by the same guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's on top of the bitter irony that this is a Western
Yeah.
filmed in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So it's kind of remarkable.
Hey, Jersey
But
can be its own frontier.
that's true. That's very true. But a Western in New Jersey. Kids, if you don't know geography, New Jersey's on the East Coast. So Western. Okay. You do have to explain that to some people. But again, some of these old films, especially if you get involved in some of the films by a filmmaker named Georges Méliès. He was a French
I love Georges Méliès.
He was a French magician who turned to filmmaking. And he made films around the turn of the century.
He
And
made
his
some
work,
of the most joyous films that are still in creation.
he made a film in 19, I'm going to say, '05, where he takes off his own head.
Yeah.
There's a film where he's got a guy sitting in a chair. He waves a curtain in front of him and pulls it off, and the guy's a skeleton.
Yeah.
And he waves the curtain again, and he pulls it, and the skin comes back on.
Yeah.
It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, he was one of the first to really develop visual effects.
And he enjoyed himself.
Oh, and his joy is fully evident on every frame of every one of his movies.
He was a showman.
He was, and he enjoyed every minute of it.
And if you've ever seen the movie, it's a funny little movie. It's A Trip to the Moon,
I love that movie.
1907. It's kind of amazing. It's kind of a Jules Verne.
Best known for that and Gulliver's,
What's that?
It's what he's best known for.
Yeah.
That and Gulliver's Travels. Have you ever seen his Gulliver's Travels?
Mm-mm.
Oh my
No.
God, that is awesome. The way that he uses composite shots to make the Lilliputians.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's using a composite shot before an optical printer was ever even thought of, let alone put down on paper and tried to have been made. Like,
yeah.
And he's doing optical shots.
Yeah.
On his own, just using exposure and re-exposure.
This was experiment after experiment after experiment.
And all of it turned out so good.
And he was so honored by Martin Scorsese.
Oh, Hugo was a wonderful movie.
In the movie Hugo.
Oh, I love that movie.
I do too, because that is the greatest promotion for film preservation that I've ever seen.
Yep. I adore that movie so very much. But yeah.
But the thing is,
go ahead.
when you come around to silent films, it's a whole different world.
Mm-hmm.
When you have the patience, and a lot of people don't have the patience for this. When you have the patience to sit down and spend an evening with a silent film, it can be a magical experience. In a film like Nosferatu, Or for me, it was a film like Metropolis.
Yeah.
Um, when you can sit down and you can watch a film like that really demands your time
Hmm.
because it's all visual.
Right.
You realize that these people, probably up until the sound era, were interested in experimentation.
Hmm.
They were interested in expanding the craft of filmmaking by experimenting. I think Coppola said we've only discovered 6% of what cinema can be,
Hmm.
and about 3% of that was done in the silent era.
Yeah, pretty much.
4% maybe.
Yeah.
We don't experiment anymore. Not like this.
It's not lucrative.
It's not lucrative.
So, I mean, independent cinema can. Regrettably, um, independent cinema is usually just decently produced low budget movies that are still trying to get sold and make money.
Sometimes they get lucky.
Yeah. But my point is that they're usually there are people independent filmmakers who are really pushing envelopes and but there's others that are just like they just want their movie to get sold and make money and break in.
I want a film where I need time to process what it's about.
Mhm.
Um, I know there's a movie that we disagree on. It's a movie called A Ghost Story,
Mhm.
where you really have to decide what you think it's about.
Yeah, see, I don't think
It's
we
about a
differ
guy who
that
it's
much.
about a it's about a guy who dies, and he spends all of eternity watching his own house be sold to other people and eventually be torn down. And then he lives so long that time begins to repeat itself.
Right.
And it's an amazing experience that
Or
I
is
don't
that
think.
his spirit passing into the eternal, therefore
Right.
making him always having been a ghost there,
And he
even
becomes
while he was
unstuck in
alive?
time.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of it's a beautiful movie. The problem I had with it is strictly and specifically Casey Affleck.
Who's in the movie but not really in the movie.
Yeah, but he's still there. He's still getting paid, and I think that once you've at least been accused by more than one people of sexual assault, I think they should put you on the back burner for a little while until they figure out if any of that was really what was going on,
I
and not
can't blame the
reward
movie.
you.
I can't blame the movie for that.
I can blame David
I
Lowery for
really,
casting him.
but I can't blame what I see on the screen because I have to see it as a movie.
It's see, Casey Affleck was not integral to that movie.
Yeah.
It could have been anyone else,
Hmm.
and David Lowery, yeah, maybe he's friends with him, whatever, I don't care. There's an optic, and when you're taking your Disney money and making an independent movie,
Hmm.
don't do it with a person accused of sexual assault if you can. I mean, honestly, is that really asking too much?
No, and I completely understand what you're saying,
I have a problem with just the
but I
fact of
can't
that.
with that movie. I can't. I have to separate it because
Oh,
what I'm
the
seeing, what I'm
concept of it
seeing
is
on
brilliant.
screen, I have to separate it from its real life ramifications because what I'm seeing is something that I will never see again.
The concept and execution of the film I cannot fault, and I did
Yeah.
watch the movie. Uh,
Mm.
it is very good, especially because you don't have to look at Casey Affleck, and there's no real way of knowing that that's really him there or not.
Yeah, I mean he
Pretty quickly,
dies pretty quickly in the movie.
yeah. But I don't know. I would
I
feel better about it, and probably would have been less likely to push it away
mm,
had it been a different actor.
I have to draw a line between the real and what I see on the screen. Again, because I see a film that I was absolutely deeply moved by, and I don't get that experience very often.
Right, sure.
So I guess if I had to look at him for 2 hours, some movies I have trouble getting to
Yeah, well,
that I really like Seven. I have a real hard time with
I
Seven
have not
anymore.
watched Seven since all of the Kevin Spacey stuff went down. The only Kevin Spacey movie I can think of watching was Baby Driver, and he dies in it, so I was pretty satisfied.
I saw Baby Driver once.
Me
I
too.
enjoyed it
Yeah,
very much.
I liked it a lot, but
I didn't think it was, a perfect movie, but I enjoyed it. But
I mean,
I
that's just me. I haven't really been able to go back to Woody Allen movie. Every time you bring up, hey, maybe we should do another Woody Allen episode, I'm like,
Woody Allen did a lot of great work.
he did do a lot of great work. It's very hard to watch him on screen
Mhm.
with all of those allegations, and they are not new allegations.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
we have so much fun when we talk about Woody Allen.
we do. It's becoming harder and harder for me to separate the man from the deeds.
Mm.
Um, and
Well, for me, Woody Allen's always been a creep anyway,
well,
so
sure, yeah. I mean, I started watching him um, after the whole uh, thing happened with when he and Mia broke up and everything. So
I was watching it before all of the allegations came out, and I still knew he was a
yeah,
creep.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
But
He
he's
just always
still
seems like a
he's
creep. He's funny.
but he's still one of my favorite filmmakers.
Yeah,
I actually have on my list a movie next year that I want to talk about from him,
oh yeah.
and and um, and it has him and Mia Farrow. So if I can enjoy the movie, I can enjoy the movie. But sometimes there are films that are hard for me to watch.
Like
It
husbands
was
and
hard.
wives.
It was hard for me to sit and watch. It was hard for me to go back to Pulp Fiction
Mm,
as I'm
yeah.
sitting there watching it, and the Miramax thing comes up, and I'm like,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Miramax, seeing it. On the other hand, to that one, I mean, I think my problem is they've already got my money if I'm putting in a DVD of Miramax.
yeah,
They got my money a long time ago,
yeah,
and me watching it is not going to enrich Harry Weinstein anymore. So
Harvey, yeah.
Harvey, or Harvey and Bob and all of that. So I don't. The fact that they were behind it but weren't actually the filmmakers, I have a
Mhm.
difficult time with Roman Polanski movies too. And I even chose one this year.
I've forgiven Roman Polanski a long time ago.
Roman Polanski raped a child. Now, did he say that he didn't do it? No. Did he stand trial and accept a guilty verdict? Yes, he did. When he left, it was because the sentence that was agreed upon by his counsel and the prosecution was changed and greatly worsened by the judge. Uh, that's when he left. It's because he didn't want to do the time that was not what was part of his deal if he pled guilty.
Where I am with that is that she forgave him.
Yes, and
Um,
as far as it can go in statutory cases, it was consensual. But it's still a statutory rape case. And, you know, like I said, I have trouble watching his movies, but I still do.
mm,
And I've known that about him since before I saw probably Chinatown was the first movie I saw of his. But it doesn't make it any more palatable to sit there
Well,
and watch it and
everybody
know,
knew.
you know.
Look, everybody knew that Roman Polanski was a freak,
Well,
and
sure.
everybody still knows that Roman Polanski's a freak. I mean, there's that great scene on Family Guy where Stewie grabs the bully and he drags him into the basement and he ties him up. And,
We're playing house. Why is he all tied up? Roman Polanski's house.
see,
but
you know,
but and this is way off of Nosferatu, but I'll say this when it comes to it.
Hmm.
Saying we all knew that they were this way anyway feels like, well, we shouldn't expect them to act any differently, so give them a blank slate and they can do whatever they want. That feels bad to me. It's like, yes, they're creeps, and we should not reward them by allowing them to continue making money, to continue to be allowed to be creeps.
but yet we give it to him.
We do. And,
I
like,
own, I own, I don't know how many Woody Allen
I own a
movies.
lot of Woody Allen movies.
I own
Too.
a lot of Polanski movies. You know,
I think I have 3 Polanski movies that I paid for.
I own several of those. I own Repulsion. I own Chinatown. I own
Hmm.
The Tenant. I own The Pianist, which I haven't seen actually.
Oh, really?
I've never seen that one.
I saw that in the theater.
Um, I own,
You know, I
I
mean,
can sit and watch them.
I have The Pianist. I own Rosemary's Baby. I own Chinatown. I own
Mhm.
Repulsion. Uh, those
And
are
Rosemary's Baby, yeah.
yeah. So I mean,
And I mean, we're going to talk about Rosemary's
yes,
Baby next
and it
week.
was my choice.
Yeah,
I'm I'm fully aware of that, but I do have a difficult time
mhm,
with it. Uh,
yeah,
you know, I appreciate the tortured genius. I just don't appreciate knowing that he tortured others to get there.
right.
So,
Well,
you know,
it's a hard road to go with this. It really is. It's a hard and it seems a little hypocritical to be separating Kevin Spacey movie from a Woody Allen movie. It's a little hypocritical, but um, I have been in love with Woody Allen movies since I saw Annie Hall as a teenager, and I will continue to be in love with Woody Allen movies. I've been in love with Roman Polanski movies since I saw Chinatown as a teenager,
mhm,
and I will continue to watch Roman Polanski movies.
yeah.
Um, but I again, it's a hard road because you pick and choose, and it seems a little hypocritical, but um,
That's why
that's
I try very hard to just kind of broad swath it and just, you know, be content to know that I am going to be missing some things that I enjoyed when I was younger, or that I will probably enjoy today, but
mhm.
because they star or are made by somebody that is just like, I'm more than likely going to steer clear of it. Or
Oh hell,
if I
how many
watch it,
Chaplin
I'm not paying for
how many Chaplin
it.
films have we talked about?
Yeah, yeah, and he was kind of
And
a
Chaplin
terrible
likes young
person too.
girls.
Yeah,
I mean,
I like Jerry Lee Lewis's music, but he married his 14-year-old cousin.
yeah,
I mean, I just I this is way off of Nosferatu. I just don't want people to think to pigeonhole us and to think that we don't care about this stuff when we pick these directors.
mhm,
Um, we do. I
mhm.
agonize over this stuff,
I do too.
you know, and it's a question of when do you let the art speak for itself? And I think as long as you're not providing money to the people that are in question and you can
Mhm.
stomach watching them if they're actors, you're not really enriching them in any degree
Yeah,
by watching their work. So I feel a little bit better about it
mhm.
than going to see a new movie starring Kevin
Yeah,
Spacey or going to see
yeah.
the new Woody Allen movie. If I get a screener for it, I'll watch it.
Mhm.
Or if it shows up on whatever, Amazon Prime or Netflix or something, I'll watch
Or
it.
hell, if I find a $2 copy.
Probably because they're not going to see any money of that.
Right.
That's been so far sold, resold, repackaged, resold, repackaged, resold that nobody owns it anymore.
Now, I want to also say this. I'm no angel. I haven't done these things, so I'm no angel. I realize, there are probably skeletons in my closet. Not like this, but um, nobody is. But when you're a public figure, you have to, there is, especially when you're in show business, there's a permissiveness that will not be permissive anymore. And
Which I think is positive progress.
it is, because it's getting rid of the casting couch.
Ugh, that has
It's
just
getting
been
rid of the casting couch
single grossest thing about Hollywood.
and the 5 o'clock girls and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's getting rid of all of that junk. That's what all of this is. The Me Too movement does have some value to it.
The Me Too movement has a lot of value to it.
There's a lot of value to it, but so that's what all of this is. It's not just finger pointing. There's something to it.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Nosferatu.
Okay, so we finally.
So we go from
we
blood-sucking
finally-
executives
We finally
to
found the turn that gets us back onto the interstate after we were going through those weird back roads looking for the gas station. So, we. Anybody who drives highways frequently will really get that one.
Well, the thing that Nosferatu, it's again, we said it was such an influential film because it informed a lot of what would be copied and recopied.
Mm-hmm.
But it was such an enigmatic film that it was probably the only vampire movie that could ever inspire a behind-the-scenes film like Shadow of the Vampire.
Shadow of the Vampire is so funny.
Because it's
terrifyingly funny.
Mhm.
Now I got a chance to revisit it.
Yeah.
And I don't think you did.
I've seen it several times though.
It's such a wonderful little movie. I enjoy it every time I see it. Every time I even think of it, I get a smile on my face. If I'm looking through and I see it on my shelf, because I have the DVD copy back from when it first came out.
And I'm going to tell you something. There is nobody on this earth, no current actor on this earth right now that could probably play a pompous, stuck-up-his-own-ass German director from that era, like John Malkovich.
Oh, well, no. Now, I have heard from admirers and people who have studied him that is a gross, overwrought characterization that bears no real resemblance to Murnau. But I don't care, because that's who Murnau is to me.
The idea that he is willing to let his cast and crew, up to and including his leading lady, die.
Just so he can get this on screen. Now,
right.
It's basically, it follows that supposition that Max Schreck was really a real vampire, and it basically makes this story out of proceeding from that and making the urban legend true.
Willem Dafoe, who has now played Max Schreck, Van Gogh, and Jesus.
Yes. As well as Norman Osborn. What was his character in Platoon?
Yeah.
I mean, Willem Dafoe is not as honored as he should be. Despite the fact that he is regarded as one of our greatest actors, he's respected. He's respected. He needs to be lauded more. Like,
Hmm.
he should have multiple Oscars and not multiple Oscar nominations, and that's it.
I really don't understand why Jim Broadbent won the Oscar
I
for Iris that year. I still don't get that.
I would give an Oscar to Jim Broadbent for reading the phone book,
Yeah.
but I still would have given this to Willem Dafoe over him for Iris, because Willem Dafoe. This was up for what, 2 Oscars, and Willem Dafoe
Mhm.
was one of them.
Right.
Uh,
But it's
and Malkovich should have been the other
just
one.
the conceit of the fact that that Murnau is so in love with his art that he's made a deal with Max Schreck, who is a vampire, that if he does what he tells him to do, he can, in the last scene, feed on his leading lady,
Right.
played by Catherine McCormick. And I love the fact that he eats the
He's like,
cinematographer.
you can't eat the cinematographer.
He can eat the writer.
What about the script girl? Well, okay, maybe the script girl. He's like, I don't think we need the writer anymore. Much as I'm loath to admit it, we do need the writer, because if we don't, then how are we going to explain how you get to Bremen without getting on a ship? Maybe I will let you eat the writer so you can figure out how you get there. But
I
it's
love the
wonderful.
fact that I love what I really love about this movie, outside of that, is the recreation of silent film directing.
yeah,
Because the director could direct,
yeah,
and he didn't need any sound, so he's behind the scenes going, "You're very scared now.
yeah.
You're very scared now." And he's sort of yelling through a megaphone,
Mm-hmm.
and
Not even
it's
most of the time in this, he's just
yeah,
saying it just to them. But
yeah.
yeah, he
He's very hands-on director,
very very much so. Yes.
and he's getting uh, because and he can motivate
Mm-hmm.
without having all of the sound. There's no quiet on the set.
Right. Nobody can.
It's quiet on screen.
Right. You could put a phonograph on for or a piano player for mood, and
Hmm.
talking all through it. Everybody's walking around. As long as you're not walking in front of the camera lens,
Right.
it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Which I always say is that that's why silent movies are such a different world,
Mm-hmm.
because you could make them in that way,
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't the microphones, that thing, and singing in the rain,
Mm-hmm.
where they're trying to trying to hide the microphone.
Yeah.
They didn't have to do all of that.
No.
You could be anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting, even though this is a fantasy, supposedly,
Mm-hmm.
even though this is a fantasy, it's just a really interesting insight into how films were made at the
Right.
time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I just love John Malkovich in this, just as a director who just does not care.
No.
He's got a narrow vision in
Yes.
mind.
He literally says what I think is the precursor to Pictures or It Didn't Happen.
Hmm.
He said, if it's not on film, it's not real.
Right.
He says that to Shrek to get him to sacrifice himself for the end of the movie.
Right.
It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Pictures or It Didn't Happen was really intense in 1921.
Hmm.
Like,
And you could almost match um, shots in this movie from shots from Nosferatu.
you actually can almost perfectly, knowing the only difference is that you're seeing Willem Dafoe, and you know that you're seeing Willem Dafoe. Uh,
Yeah.
I watched Nosferatu last night, or during the day yesterday, and then I watched Shadow of the Vampire last night and this morning.
Hmm.
So right on top of each other, it was really interesting to see how they really did recreate it, instead of slipping in the actual film.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I love is I love that he sets up Max Schreck as a method actor.
Yeah, from the Stanislavski school.
Stanislavski school. He sets him up as a method actor. No one can speak to him
They have to
except
call
as Count
They have
Orlok.
to call him Orlok or Count. They can't
Yeah,
call him Max or Shrek.
right.
Yeah.
No one can have any interaction with him, because he has to be in the moment. It's like, no, he doesn't have to be in the moment. He is the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. The the things that they do and get away with and play with in Shadow of the Vampire is really fun, imaginative, and I really wish the director did something any good after.
But I got to mention the end of this film because they finally get it, and there's this beautiful look on John Malkovich's face, and he's like,
And
"I think we've got it."
yeah. And that was like the end of the movie, the very end. I think we got it.
Yeah. It's a terrific film. It really is. It's an interesting idea, and no other film could probably inspire this without seeming like a gimmick because we don't know anything about Max Schreck,
Right.
and he died so young. And this is what we know him from, and we have no idea, no reason to think otherwise. It's like maybe he was a genuine article.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to fall into that line of thinking.
Yeah.
It's very easy
Yeah.
to fall into that line of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much all I
Yeah, I
got.
was gonna say. So, Shadow of the Vampire.
Sorry for the side roads.
If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Thank you very much,
Right.
George Harrison. That about, I think, what do we have? What do we have coming up? I'll tell you what we have coming up. You and me and the Devil Makes Three. We're doing
Next week, The Lord of the Flies, The Prince of Darkness.
we're doing distinctively 3, possibly 4 if I have time to wedge something in or if you can find it. Haxan from 1922. So
Mm-hmm.
I match our oldest one the week after.
Mm-hmm.
Moving from that to then 1969's Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby. And
68.
68. And then going
Mm-hmm.
to all the way up to 2015 in a movie that goes all the way back to the 1630s, The Witch.
The Witch, which I have not seen.
Oh, it's so good. You just saw Haxan for the first time too.
I just saw Haxan the first time. It's incredible.
It is really good. And then we'll tell you about Turkey Month when we get to Turkey Month, I think.
Well, we're going to open it.
Yes, with
We're going to open it with a movie that I had originally planned to put in October,
until you
but
watched
then I
it.
saw it again. And I thought, no, this needs to be in Turkey Month. And it's not a movie. It's not a choice that's going to make a lot of people happy. But I'm going to open Turkey Month with Pet Sematary.
Mm-hmm. You know what?
Because this movie sucks.
I've not seen it.
This movie is terrible. It's
one of my
Stephen King
picks.
was heavily... Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Stephen King was heavily involved in the writing.
Oh, well, see, there's the problem.
This was during a period before they started turning his movies into TV movies.
Which
and
were
they were
so
making
much worse.
And they were making a movie every time he wrote a grocery list.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, if he wrote a note to his wife that said he was going down the street,
Mm-hmm.
they made a movie about it.
Right.
And threw it in a theater.
And he was the executive producer.
Right. And he's in it.
Yeah.
He has a cameo in it, and I swear in the cameo he looks like Jim Jones. It's,
Well, that's unfortunate.
I'm actually really looking forward to you seeing this.
Yeah, me too. I'm really looking forward to you seeing what will close Turkey Month.
What will close Turkey Month?
Akiva Goldman's directorial debut from 2014, Winter's Tale.
Never seen it.
Sorry, I just got into a Vincent Price laugh there for a minute.
And somewhere in there, we're going to talk about the clown prince of bad movies. Because this year, my second choice is The Room.
I have not made my second choice yet, but I have watched The Room.
You know what? You can't make a movie that bad on purpose.
You can't.
You can't.
I mean, and I've seen The Disaster Artist too. He had no idea how bad what he was making was.
He still doesn't.
He still doesn't.
This movie is fascinating.
Oh yeah, and oh boy, when we get there, it, as Seth Rogen said, who was a producer on The Disaster Artist, it made me question how I understand what quality is.
Basically,
because it is endlessly watchable, and there's the scene at the end with when he's like in all of his turmoil, when he's by himself.
Oh, his temper tantrum.
When he shoots himself.
Oh, how about his temper tantrum when he's
that's
running around the room?
hilarious.
And it's the laziest temper tantrum I've ever seen.
But when he's there and he actually kills himself, there is a moment for about a minute that it is really dramatically tense. And I don't
Then
know
that goes
how
away.
he did it, and I don't know how he couldn't do it again. But there is a flash in that scene that there could have been something really good here, and there just isn't. It's like that brief little moment that saves humanity from Q. That is in the room, and that's why I think it's becomes so enduring.
It's the biggest, longest ego trip you've ever seen in your life. It is a man who is so in love with himself, creating a movie about people who are so in love with him. It's basically, it's largely that, and it's a porn film without the porn.
Right. It's a soft core. We'll talk about it in November. I'm looking forward to that discussion.
Yeah.
I'm tossing about perhaps another Riff Tracks classic for my second pick. But I haven't quite gotten there yet. I have a few decisive choices, all of which will be very fun and nowhere near as torturous as our conclusion will be. So that does it for us today here on the Pod Bay Doors. We thank you so much for joining us. You can find all of our episodes at the Pod Bay Doors podcast.wordpress.com. You can find us every week on iTunes and on YouTube. And you can find us on Twitter at pod_bay. We're also on Patreon. Throw a tip into our virtual tip jar. We thank you very much for any of those. Also at pod_bay. Same handle as the Twitter. We thank you so much for joining us and hanging in with us. And the Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
I'm a vampire, babe, sucking blood from the earth. I'm a vampire, babe, sucking blood from the earth. Well, I'm a vampire, babe, ourselves.